behind today's presentation is really how can we engage more with the Mela community to make DLME a better resource and make it more accessible for researchers in the Middle East and North Africa. So brief timeline of our funding and the project. We're going all the way back to 2016. The project has matured quite a lot since then, and we're nearing the end of a funding period with Qatar National Library funding the project, which will end in March. And then we will continue forward with the project as well. And there will be new developments, which we'll talk some about today, and we'll kind of explore some of those. So I'll talk about several of the components of the project. The web application, which is what most of you will see and be familiar with. I'll kind of give an introduction to that and kind of demo the application. I'll also talk about our data aggregation pipeline, like how do we get data into the Digital Library of the Middle East and keep it up to date. I'll talk about some of our efforts for improving access and discovery to the contents in DLME, and then leave the majority of the session for kind of discussing or introducing some possible areas of collaboration with Mela during this presentation, and I think we'll continue that during lunch. So the web application is dlmenetwork.org. I think most of you have probably seen the website. The website itself is fully available in English and Arabic. The metadata is in whatever language we give it in. We do some normalization, and whenever we normalize fields, we translate into English and Arabic as needed. So we do what we can to kind of improve the metadata to kind of make it accessible by type or language or searchable by date. We also do some work to kind of create curated views into the collection. So you can kind of explore that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. I will show a little bit about kind of our user base. We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 or so users a month visiting the site. And one thing that we're kind of happy to see is that most of them are from the Middle East and North Africa. So many of our users are actually searching and using the site in Arabic. And we get a lot of feedback. Most of the feedback coming from the site is in Arabic as well. So we're getting a lot of questions from users and feedback from users. For our data aggregation, we have our own kind of custom tech stack that we use to harvest metadata from providers, map it to our own standard, kind of normalizing the data in the process, do some kind of integrity checks, and then load it into the DLME application. For this pipeline, kind of it's a new development we initiated over the last year and just finished a work cycle kind of improving it. And for cases that fit the kind of ideal case for us, it makes it really easy to load data into DLME and keep it up to date. So an ideal case would be someone has an OAI PMH endpoint with sets implemented, or a IIIF collection with a collection level manifest, or any kind of XML with a collection level, URL, or a CSV file. In any of those cases, it makes it quite easy for us to load data. We can get data into the application in a matter of hours, and then it will automatically kind of refresh it for us. So I'll show you our newest data provider, and this is an example of one of these cases where they have a IIIF collection level manifest, and we're able to, for 2 collections, and we're able to just load the data in and get it into DLME. So this is the Lebanese American University. They have 2 collections. These kind of boxes just kind of walk through different tasks that we go through in this process. So we harvest the data, we load it, and then we do some checking against the past harvest. If the data hasn't changed since last time, then we kind of abort the process. We don't need to continue. If it has changed, Then we rerun our transform scripts on the new data. And we do some data validation on the transform to make sure everything came out correctly. We index it, and then we run a little kind of harvest report, which looks something like this, and comes back to us in email, and it can also go to data providers, and it kind of gives us a coverage report of, you know, which fields we're mapping, you know, are they in, what languages are they in this case, you know, for the type, the idiom type field, we have English and Arabic for every field. And then, you know, it checks thumbnails, to do all the images resolve, it checks the URLs for the resources, have any of them broken since last time. Coverage or rights reports, you know, do we have rights specified for copyright for the cultural heritage object, for the web resource, you know, for aggregation rights. Do the thumbnails meet our minimum, our recommended standard for size? And then we have a little crosswalk here that is, the reports are meant to kind of help engage our data partners and help them understand what we're doing to their metadata, give us another level of kind of checking, are we mapping everything correctly, get some engagement from them, you know, on how we might change anything that might need to be changed, and start a conversation about how they might want to represent their data in DLME. Another area that I'll talk about is just what we do to improve access. So we have a team of curatorial advisors. We discuss about you know, how to represent content in DLME. So every collection that's added is added to this recently added section. So users can see kind of any new content. We normalize the type field, the language field, and the date field. And then we also translate the date from Gregorian to Hedry calendar or vice versa, so that it's searchable in both calendar systems. And then all of those fields are translated into English and Arabic, so they're fully available in those two languages. And then we're exploring other ways that we can work with subject experts, particularly in the areas of archaeology, because that's where we've gotten a lot of traction lately, a lot of interest, but how to better represent collections, how to pull in other data, you know, what data we're missing to really complement another collection and really make it more user-friendly and useful for researchers. And there's a lot of you know, work that could be done to continue to improve this. And I think this is one of the areas that, you know, we would be open to collaborating with Mela members as well. And then I think the main focus of our conversations, we really want to shift. We're at a place where the technology has matured enough. It's easy enough to add data. We want to continue adding data over the coming years, but we really want to start putting more effort and energy into collaborating with experts. So this means the Mela community, it also means researchers and other kinds of experts. But we have a few ideas that we wanted to introduce as possible ways that we could collaborate. And then I think we can continue the discussion over lunch, and we would love to hear ideas from you all as well. So one idea that's come up is, and you all have kind of done this work yourself, is just the idea of how do we know what collections are out there in the world, what digital collections are out there. If you work in the library, your researchers come, you know, professors come, students come, and they want to know what collections are out there. They're new to this process, and it's really hard to find what's out there. And so most of you have probably created, you know, something like this, where you have a really useful LibGuide that shows all the links that you've personally collected. And after doing this for a year or so, you realize it's a lot of work. It's really hard to keep up to date. And if you've done a really good job, then you get a really long list like this that is hard on users to access. You know, how do they know which ones are in the language they're looking for, which ones cover the topics they're looking for, or the dates, you know, temporal coverage, these kinds of things. So what we are proposing is, could this be done collaboratively? Instead of everyone creating their own LibGuide, could we all work together to describe these digital collections at a little more systematic way, and then make them searchable in Digital Library of the Middle East. So make a collections registry where we can facet by temporal coverage, by spatial coverage, by language, by type of resource, or whatever other fields we have in the metadata schema that we choose. And then instead of everyone, describing their own collections and listing on their websites, we're all kind of contributing to one universal collection registry. These contents may or may not be available in DLME, but at least at the collection level, they'll be searchable. We could even translate the collection level metadata into Arabic and English, so that at that level, they're fully available in Arabic and English, and make them a lot more discoverable to our users. So that was one idea that we thought of, and we've been kind of discussing internally for more than a year. Another is web archiving. So we've all seen websites that go up and then you look for them a few years later and they're gone, right? It's hard to keep things on the web. I think the problem is even worse in the Middle East in some cases because of all the political challenges. It takes money, it takes technical expertise to keep things on the web. And with all of the kind of turnover, often websites are just not very long-lived. So, what would it be like to collaborate on identifying important websites, getting them archived, and then making them discoverable through DLME, so that if you're looking for a particular link that you know of and it's broken, you can go look for that link in DLME and see if the website has been archived and you can still access it that way. So, I think collaboration around identifying which websites should be archived, and then, the Digital Library of the Middle East may be working with the Internet Archive or other collaborators to figure out the technical aspects of doing that and kind of preserving these websites. Data sets and digital projects is another area, right? We have this kind of increase in digital humanities research, and with that comes data sets. Researchers don't necessarily always know where to publish them. Sometimes they're on GitHub, sometimes they're linked to on a personal website. Could we describe the data sets and make them more accessible for users? So if someone's looking for Persian corpora, they can go to the Digital Library of the Middle East and select that kind of type and that language and find what they're looking for. Or digital projects that are really useful, but they don't fit into the traditional library kind of description where we can harvest metadata from them. Can we still describe them and make them more discoverable? Or even, machine learning models, for example. We have presentations at Mesa later on, handwritten text recognition for Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, right? And training these models becomes, it takes a lot of resources. And there could be someone else that wants to use that model. Could they actually just find that on DLME, and could we link those and describe those as well? And then, of course, another area that we're always interested in is just establishing new data partnerships. We have almost 200,000 records in DLME. There's so many more out there in the world. And sometimes it's hard to make connections with institutions or even discover the collections. So this seems like a great community to leverage the collective, relationships and knowledge that we have here to figure out which collection should be in the Digital Library of the Middle East, and then make the connections to kind of get the metadata in there. We can continue the discussion over lunch, and I think we may have time for a few questions before that. But before we jump into that, I'll say that we have created a forum just to keep track of anyone who's interested in kind of discussing these ideas or collaborating in one or more of the areas that we've mentioned. And the form is linked right here on our website. So you can just kind of click the link, fill out the form. It's a simple, name, institution, email, and what areas you might be interested in collaborating. It also has kind of another option. So if you have an idea that you want to suggest for a possible area of collaboration between MELA or between your own institution in the Digital Library of the Middle East, you're welcome to put that in there as well, and then we can be in touch and discuss that idea with you. So I think with that, I can stop the presentation and take, I think we have, what, 10 minutes or so, 9 minutes for questions. So we can take questions, and if we don't have questions, we can move into our discussion at lunch.
The lunch will be ready in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes, okay. So any questions or comments?
I have a question. You mentioned that. Yeah, you mentioned that you harvest some data from Lebanese University. What kind of data do you harvest from there?
So the data is for 2 digital collections that they have online. So it's just the metadata for the collections. One is the Lebanese painters. So they have digitized paintings, and so it's the metadata about the paintings. And then another one is on Ottoman embroidery. So it's digitized pieces of kind of embroidered rugs and things like that that are sort of metadata for those objects.
It sounds very interesting, but how did you get to know about them?
The kind of work that we're talking here and trying to make easier, looking through other people's LibGuides, doing lots of search to find these things, and then scrounging around for connections to someone that works there to get permission to harvest and get the technical information to the URL to their IIIF manifests. And then once we have that, then we can just kind of put it into our technical workflow.
Okay, so in this case, I invite you to look at our LibGuides.
I will. Hopefully we can transfer some of that information to a more user-friendly way. Yeah, thanks.
Other questions? Other ideas? We have still about 8 minutes or 7 minutes for the lunch. Yes, just 1 second.
Thank you, Jacob. This is Rami from AKTC at MIT, and actually it's very good work. I like the project and I'm really interested. And I have been speaking also with my colleagues at AKTC to maybe participate. So we are looking, I'm going to discuss that more with them because I'm already conference, so let's see. But my question is about more like the technical. So for example, like at AKTC, we have ArcNet. So how it's like, how we can possibly link that? Is it technically easy, or what kind, like you said, like you harvest the metadata, but like how that's possible? I need just more technical information on that. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll answer up here so that I'm viewable in the camera, but then I'll show some on my website on my computer as well. So we have lots of options for transferring metadata. The ideal case is you have an OAI PMH endpoint, or you have a CSV file on the web or something like that. If that's available, it's just a simple 2-hour process to automate it. If you don't have something like that, then we can work with a database export. The disadvantage of that is it just has to be manually refreshed. So if you add more records, we won't pick those up unless you do another export and we do another, process of retransforming and reloading it. But we can definitely work with that. So it would be a matter of just having a technical kind of discussion on how can you get data out of your projects and how can you get it to us. And we found a way to work with pretty much every scenario. So I'm sure there is a way. Just we'd have to kind of work through the details on that to see how. But then I can also say that, so every resource in DLME links back to the data provider site. So I think this is the value of DLME, the main value I think of DLME is that or at least the initial idea was improve discovery and access, right? If you're a student and you're new to research in the Middle East and North Africa, or if you're a professor and you want to send your students to find resources, they can go to one place, they can search, and they can find what they're looking for. But DLME is not necessarily always the best place to actually do research in some cases. If you're doing research on like the Cairo Geniza collection, for example, which is spread, you know, all over the world in several different institutions, you might be able to see where those institutions are, but then you might lead to a better site that provides more specialized metadata and specialized kind of context into the collection than we can provide in the digital library of the least. So you can click on the, you know, on the link and go back to the provider site. So I think that's the general workflow that we're seeing, is that, you know, many researchers start in DLME, they do their research, they kind of discover the objects they're looking for. Some they don't look beyond DLME, but many they once they find kind of what they're looking for, then they're going back to the data provider's site to do more research.
Any other questions? Yes, just a second.
Jacob, we have an interesting collection in the Near East section that has come to us from the 80s, before I was even there. Essentially fragments in Persian, Arabic, and Urdu that was collected from the Islamabad office, actually, and sent to LC in the 90s. And we're collaboratively working already with the Asian division at the library to sort of make a hand list or what have you. What you're doing, I would like to have an initial conversation with you and the Arab world specialist, Mohammed, sitting here at some point, just to see how potentially partnering up for materials that are hard to sort of figure out because it's text. Context is hard because it's not a book with an opening page and a colophon, but it's rare material. That sort of thing, just to brainstorm and see potentially what can be done once these items eventually get digitized for getting expert feedback from folks who are familiar with this content. The Persian is uniquely Indian Persian. The prayer material in Arabic ranges from classic Sunni to Sufi to Shiite to eccentric items. There's a lot that's science related. So there's a whole variety of things in there that we need expertise. And I don't know if that potentially would be a place where we could collaborate. So just putting that out there.
I think absolutely would be something we're interested in collaborating on. I don't know that we would have all of the answers, but we could look at other similar collections in DLME. I think another thing we've done is we've done user research as needed. So we come to a new area, we don't really understand how researchers might want to use a certain object, then we might conduct some interviews to understand, okay, what do they need to find what they're looking for, and that could impact decisions on cataloging and other things and how you describe an object. So I think we'd be happy to have a conversation, and I think probably could come up with some solutions.
Cataloging things is not easy.
Yeah.
So I think we will continue the conversation over the food. The food is ready outside. The table is outside this wall here. So you can get your sandwich, get whatever you want from the table, and come back, and we will have the same discussion here around ideas and questions and projects and collaboration. So enjoy your food, 10 minutes, and then come back, sit down, and we can continue the conversation. Thank you, everyone, please.
Maybe we can transition back. I don't think we could sit down for a minute and discuss that. Maybe we can just
No, I mean, maybe.
I hope the lunch is going fine. Everyone enjoying the food. We need to get back to the discussion, but before that, I forgot to thank the Digital Library of the Middle East for providing the lunch for today and sponsoring this session. Thank you so much for that and for your great contribution to get back to them about what they asked for. They asked for collaboration from MELA member, MELA community. So we need to get them to share our ideas, talk about what you have in thoughts, questions about any ways to collaborate positively and actively with the Digital Library of Middle East. So with that, we'll continue the conversation. Jacob will answer questions, Roy, and
Wayne and Tom.
Wayne and Tom.
Yeah.
Wayne and Tom will be actually answering questions with Jacob as well. So if you have any questions, please continue talk, continue eating, and also ask if you have questions. Ideas for collaboration from online or inside participations. So please send questions over chat or ask questions when you are here. Ahmed, you had a question before, right? Yeah, let me start with that.
I like how Mohammed is working the room. This is a natural host.
Ahmed Mustafa, Library of Congress Cairo office. You will think about harvesting websites from the Middle Eastern area. Do you do that also for government institutions that have lots of very important PDF files on their websites? I'm talking about North Africa, the area where it is really hard to acquire. And now, recently we found that many of their publications is now available on their websites. The problem with them is it's very hard to get copyright permissions from them. We tried that several times. It worked sometimes. In most of the cases, they are even refused or afraid from signing a paper or something saying, okay, I'm allowing you to harvest this publication. So how did you handle that?
So we haven't had, to be honest, we haven't had much success there either. We have found several digital libraries in North Africa. The only data partners we have in the Middle East are, we have several from Lebanon, we have several from Egypt, several from Turkey, and we have the American Institute of Maghreb Studies, which is spread out over a few countries, Morocco being one of them.
Yeah.
But outside of those countries, we've found many digital libraries, but we have not gotten much response to any of our inquiries to collaborate. So that's a kind of an area that we would love to hear from others if you have any connections or inroads in those countries. And another thought could be just maybe describing them at the collection level where copyright is not such a concern. At least they can be discoverable, though we won't be able to harvest all the metadata and make the individual objects searchable.
The issues that I'm asking for, because I agree with you that many of these publications that is available through the government is very important. And yes, after 2 years, we have this site, we have the links, and all of a sudden it could disappear from the systems. Or even if they have their archives for like 10 years, all of a sudden they can reduce it to 5 years. So if you are really depend on such of these projects, their websites to get your information, it is not stable. You cannot find them. If you harvested them, if you got them into your hard disks, again, how can you offer this if you didn't have their permission from them? They can come to you back saying, oh, you got our data. And I tried, to be honest with you, with some of the government institutions. They agree. I said with the head of these institutions, and they kept saying, oh, yes, it's free. You can take it from our websites. Take it, harvest them. That's fine. But when it came to signing a paper or send an email even to approve us harvesting this as a Library of Congress, I never received that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas, as we've talked about the next phase for Digital Library of the Middle East, this could be very promising. And so the cooperative capture as well as the cataloging, but then also the ability to index it and do replay. And we've seen there's some innovative projects that have come up. I don't know how many people might be familiar with SUCHO, which is Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, and they've done a mass crowdsourcing where they've gone out and they've manually crawled a lot of cultural heritage and government resources just to make sure that there's a copy in case they don't show up. And those are being provided now. It might be that, especially for digital humanities projects, digital projects, government documents, that would be a phase to work through. And as always, rights and access is a key part of that.
So your main work on the Middle East is only for the special collections or private companies or private institutions that are offering their material on the website, not any government institutions or anything that could be an issue with copyright.
Right now, the collection policy is really focused on cultural heritage and research materials, things that are digital, so they're online, that you can get to online, and where there's clear rights. So I think some of what you've described could fit into that with an evolution. Yeah. And everything, as Jacob mentioned, right now, DLME is an aggregator, so we are not a repository. We are bringing together resources that have already been put online elsewhere, and what we're trying to do is increase the visibility and accessibility of those materials.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thanks.
Other questions? Yes, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Jacob, for the presentation, and thank you, everyone. Maybe not everyone knows that I am from the same house. I work at Stanford University. Yes, so I wanted really, Jacob, to talk more about the discovery in this project, because I know that there is option for searching by using Arabic and other languages, maybe. So, and I attended some of the work with you in the beginning, and I know how much effort it takes from you to bring it now, and I want everyone to know about this effort too. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So as I mentioned, the site itself is fully available in Arabic, but the metadata is in whatever language it comes in. So if you're a Spanish institution, we get the metadata in Spanish. If you're a French institution, we get it in French. Sometimes some institutions will have multi-language, which we recommend and we encourage, but most institutions won't have the cataloging resources to describe objects in multiple languages. So our solar system is tuned to search for Arabic, Turkish, any European language, and also Persian. So we have settings in there. Sometimes we need to, we've found through user research that we need to tune those a little bit, and we've done that, and we'll continue to do so as we come up. But if there's no Arabic text there to search, then of course it won't get indexed. So one thing I can say we have seen is the object, the data provider that gets the most hits on DLME is the Qatar Digital Library, and it's because the metadata is so rich. It's fully available in English and it's fully available in Arabic. So when you're searching in either language, you have a good chance of pulling back those resources. So the better the metadata that going in, then of course the better discovery options we can provide. So we do have search in Arabic, in Persian, and in pretty much any language. But if the metadata is not there, then of course it won't come up in those languages.
Like suggested results can be helpful.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Can it pull in some metadata that like suggested from the system?
Like suggests
yeah.
resources. This is a feature that we've talked about. We've seen it implemented in other sites. I think the Library of Congress has, you might also be interested in these kind of, so that's something that we would be open to exploring down the road. It's not a feature we've implemented yet, but I think it's one that we have, we've done a little bit of research on and have in a backlog of work to do.
I have a quick question regarding the quality of metadata that it's harvested from other databases. If in case it's not complete or it's bad quality, do you have any project like to enhance it or to make it better?
So our transformation process does minimal improvements So the fields we've been able to normalize are dates, if they're available, type and language. So they could write language like French with a lowercase f, or they could write it Français, or they could write it in Arabic and different languages. So we normalize those fields and then we translate them. We normalize the type fields and we translate them. And if we have any kind of date, even a string format that says like 17th century, we try and convert that into an integer that then you can use our date browser to slide that. And then we also translate that into the Hedgery calendar, so you can navigate through the Hedgery calendar as well. We often add type data. It could be data that it's not so important for the collection on its own site. If it's a collection of manuscripts, they don't need to necessarily put this as a manuscript on each object. But when we ingest it into DLME and present it in the context of a bunch of photographs and other kinds of things, it is important to know that this is a manuscript. So we often add those kinds of fields to provide better context in DLME. And then we add fields for collection URLs in DLME and for institutions. So those are the fields we're able to add. We are open to exploring other fields, and we've talked about some kind of normalization over creator or contributor names, for example, could be one option, or subject normalization. I think they're definitely useful, but also a little more challenging too. So I think it's definitely something we'd be interested in exploring, and it would just be a matter of like picking some institutions, kind of working through a case study, seeing how it works, and if the results are promising, then trying to implement it on a larger scale.
Thank you.
Other questions, ideas to discuss? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if you could speak about eligibility requirements for collections that can be discoverable on DLME. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, the bar is pretty low. As Tom said, it has to be available online somewhere. So we typically, if it's just the metadata, then that wouldn't qualify. We want people to actually be able to click on a link and either view the object, stream the object through IIIF and see it in DLME, or get to a PDF or to an image that's uploaded on the provider site. So the content has to be online. It has to have some minimal metadata, which is not a whole lot. A thumbnail and a title basically is, I think, the only essential requirements. We have recommendations for more metadata, and we try to explain to data partners that how better metadata leads to better discovery and access. But other than that, it has to be kind of open. We don't currently have anything behind a login, even if it's behind a free login. But maybe we could explore that too. If it's openly available and you just have to log in, maybe there's options to link to those kinds of collections as well. We don't have any at the moment.
Great. Yeah. Magda? Okay, just one second.
So, is there any plans to have advanced search in DLME? Like I see only one box for search in general, and you have some filters. But I am wondering for better discovery if we can combine, use advanced search options, maybe better. But this is one of ideas only.
Yeah, I think if I understand what you mean by advanced search, I think you can do that. It just doesn't have a separate advanced search entry, but you can facet. For example, you can select, I only want manuscripts and I only want them in Arabic, but then I also want to search in the title of these to get, words that might show up in a title. So you can do that kind of search in DLME. We don't have necessarily any plans to implement any more advanced search, but I think this is one of the aspects of collaboration that we're really interested in with Mela and with other experts, is to know what kind of features would be useful, because we can't think of all of them. So if there are useful features, simply, providing it in our feedback link and maybe linking to another website that implements it so we can see what you're talking about, that could be really helpful for us, and we would definitely consider it.
Thank you for the presentation. So my question is about encoding character system. What type of encoding character system are you using? And I have another question. Are you relying on specific standards for metadata?
So for character encoding, I think we just use UTF. And then for standards for metadata, we work with whatever the data provider has, and just map it to our own standard. And we've basically figured out a way to map any kind of standardized schema, and also things that aren't standardized schemas that are just kind of ad hoc descriptions. We can generally find a way to map those as well. And I did have a question, kind of follow up for the group. So I know MELA has their committees, and I don't have any experience working on a committee, but I wonder how well some of the collaborations might fit within those committees, or possibly would it make sense to establish a new committee? For example, something like the web archiving, or a collaborative effort to create like a universal LibGuide for Middle Eastern resources. Would that fit into existing committees, or would there be a need to kind of explore the option for a new committee to get that work started?
If I can answer this, and then Robin, I think, has something to say as well. There are committees actually working on digital resources or digital scholarship for the Middle East studies, and we have a committee for that. This could definitely be one of the subjects where there could be some kind of collaboration with that specific committee with the Digital Library of the Middle East Studies. In addition to that, there is always an option to have a working group. So it's not to establish a new committee in MELA and so on, but it could be in forms of a working group of librarians have ideas, have projects, have ways to enhance and all of that. So you can get this group together and then have them work with you on anything that you have in mind, the ideas that you already listed in mind in the presentation. We can actually give you thoughts about this, ideas about this, and then you can come up with other projects, and then we can probably in the future have MELA do some more work with that. So forming a working group, I think it's easy. It doesn't need any approval from the executive board, as far as I know. But if it comes to a new committee, it definitely needs a lot of work actually in advance to really get that committee established. So the easy way is to go for working groups. But if you want also, in addition to the working group, you can have the conversation with the digital committee, digital scholarly committee, and they definitely will have some ways to help in that regard as well. Robin, I think, needs to add something.
Thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, so I was just going to say, it's fun to have a vendor come in and say, or a person who's creating a project come in and say, MELA should form a committee to deal with this thing that this problem that we're trying to solve. But anyway, we are open and we always welcome suggestions. It's very easy to form a MELA committee. One of the things you've got to do first is become a member. So if you're not a member of MELA, then please don't tell us what to do. And I mean that in a friendly way. But, as Mohammed said, we have a digital scholarship interest group. It's possible that what they're talking about has some overlap with what you're trying to talk about. You should get in touch with them, and the committee makeup is on our website. I mean, all the information that you need to figure out how we work is there. So
great, thank you.
Other questions, ideas, thoughts?
Dr. Sami?
Yeah.
For
now, it's for digital library.
Oh, only?
Yeah, for digital library only.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
We can actually have Dr. Sami to answer that because it's this is their time for presentation. Yeah, and we had it for over lunch because of that. Yeah. Welcome. Other questions to the Digital Library of the Middle East? I have a question actually about the ideas that we listed in the beginning. They are all great, and I feel like they need definitely some work, data sets and collecting information from library guides and all of that. What is the most pressing kind of project that we have in mind and you need to start working on? Need some help from Mela members to get to that. So if you can just say that and also explain why it's most needed now, probably we can find some interested members to can actually get in touch with you and actually help with that in some way.
Sure. So I think maybe Tom and Wayne have different thoughts, and I'll welcome those. My thought would be the collections registry would probably be the most pressing, and I think the reasons for that, there's a technical workflow of like, how do you get, so if several of us were collaborating to describe collections online and we decide on a metadata schema and then we enter the metadata for 100 collections, how does that data get into DLME? And then we add 10 more the next month, how does it get refreshed? So there's a technical workflow that I think could apply to the other areas as well, to the web archiving and other things that could be worked out on this. I also think it surfaces collections that we may not know about that then we can add to DLME. So it kind of establishes, it gets more data into DLME faster. So yeah, I would say that would be my thought too, but I think you could probably make a case for web archiving or data sets as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know, do either of you have different thoughts?
Well, I think one of the big areas that is kind of critical right now are data sets that are perhaps scientific in nature, that are really looking at being generated outside of the United States. There's also a lot of, we mentioned briefly some of the models that are being generated for handwriting text recognition, OCR. I think those kinds of data set models are also vitally important to start getting out, described in a useful way for the kind of scholarship that's going on. That's not necessarily looking at manuscripts, but using manuscripts and other data from those manuscripts to inform the kind of scholarship that for the next generation. So I think there's a lot of the things that we're currently doing in librarianship that will inform the future of how librarians, how scholars are actually interacting with the data that we already have. And part of that is that data set model, being able to extract it out and being able to reuse it.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, so on a completely different vein, I think the most important thing to do is to locate DLME in librarianship and digital librarianship in the Middle East. I feel the reason we are here is the last 3 years have been funny. I don't know if anyone else experienced that, but it's been a little bit weird. And we are just coming to the end of the second or the third phase of the project. So for us, this is a really good time to assess what the direction should be going forward. And we feel like we have good ideas and there's some good prospects, but there's also a lot of ideas that we don't have. And we're really trying to strengthen the network and the understanding of what could be possible, what would be high value, not only for scholars and researchers in the Middle East, but also Middle Eastern librarians, regardless of where they are. So thank you for the input. We're here to listen and try to get a better appreciation for what might be possible, what might be promising. So for me, I would say what is most exciting or what has the most potential for the type of resource that DLME is. And there are some other ones, including the Arabic Union catalog was beautiful. And I also have some questions, would like to follow up on that, because I think there might be some partnership or complementarity there. So for us, it's what are the things that you all would find useful, or are there specific partners? Are there specific collections? Are there specific functions that would be most beneficial to add? And then who might be willing to work with us on that?
So the other question that I have from that specific aspect is, do you normally reach out to institutions and ask for their materials or their files, resources, or do you wait until they reach out to you and say, we have something and it's good to have that connected in the Digital Library and Middle East Studies?
So yeah, so a little of both. When I started in 2018, we built our own kind of, it wasn't a LibGuide, but it was a spreadsheet full of digital collections. So found as many as we could find. And we started reaching out to all the institutions in the Middle East and North Africa first. We did a round of a year or a year and a half of just reaching out to those institutions to see if we could establish data partnerships. And then we moved on to basically the rest of the world after that. Since that initial outreach, we've gone back a few times and with new members of our curatorial board who might have new connections, they've gone back through and recontacted people. Still, the majority of the institutions we've contacted, maybe 70% or so, we haven't heard back from. Most of them that we do get a contact with are open to a discussion, and many of those involve or end up in establishing a data partnership. But we've also had institutions approach us, especially in the last year or two, where DLME is becoming a little more visible. We have institutions reach out to us, and we just put a link on the homepage of the site to encourage institutions to contact us as well. So hopefully we'll see more of that going forward.
If no other questions, I have another follow-up. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually going to ask that last question that he asked, but to follow up on it, does your website have like highlights of subjects that the data would cover? Research recently in Middle Eastern studies has also been interested in modern culture, food, and not just heavy on the political events. So do you highlight some of that might be covered in your collection?
Yeah, so we have, in terms of just subject access, we do provide that metadata directly from data providers. So there's a facet that you can facet on for subject. It's not normalized, so it's kind of hard to search across it, but you have an entry point there. And then all the tiles on the homepage, these are kind of more like curated experiences. So we're interested in doing more of that kind of work. Building more tiles. We're working on archaeological sites as a possible next step into that. So we'll have that group with different categories for different archaeological sites, and then those will lead to a short description and some resources. We also have the potential to write or to host kind of articles to introduce topics, subjects, and we would be interested in exploring that as well. So I think there has been some work in that area, and I think there's a lot more work. Of course, the more objects you put into a site, the harder it is to find things in there. So having these kind of subject-based entry points is really helpful, and we would love to hear ideas for new kind of tiles that we might put on the homepage or articles or things like that. And also would be happy to collaborate with anyone with expertise to assist with that.
Other questions? Coming back to my question is where you are approaching or you are reaching out to institutions. In most of the cases, I know that they have some kind of collection already there. That you can harvest immediately, or you can actually get some kind of use from that specific collection to your website or digital library. But in most of the cases, they probably would say, we have these 2,000 items online, but we have 200,000 items are there and they need funding. What is the situation what is the answer in this situation? What do you provide some kind of funding, especially for Middle East or digital libraries in the Middle East?
I'm going to pass that one. Guys.
So the Digital Library of the Middle East specifically does not. However, we do work with multiple partners in the region to help secure funding for those kinds of projects. We've worked with partners in Yemen, in Iraq, Algeria, and basically assisting in figuring out how you can go about, number one, providing the infrastructure to do that, providing training to do that, and then the infrastructure to save it, to preserve it, and make it accessible online. So DLME specifically as this platform, no. But we are always looking to help people provide that kind of funding and reach out to partnerships that we have to make sure that that can happen.
This is great.
And I'll just add that it's not necessarily limited to digitization and getting content online. We're also exploring possibilities to improve metadata or link other collections or create these kind of curated entry points as well. We're exploring funding options with experts in those areas as well. So it's not limited to just digitization.
So I have a question regarding authority file and name authority file. Is your metadata, or if you harvest any metadata from any database, if it's linked to an authority file, is it also linked in your database as well, or?
It's not in DLME. Individual data providers may use authority files in creating or in deciding which name to put in, which field. None of that is surfaced in DLME, but I think that's an area that we would be open to exploring. Like, how do we link authority files for names or places or other entities?
Yeah, especially since some of the collection are international, so it would be great if at least it's linked to the national authority file of those countries.
Absolutely, and I think Mela would be a great. I mean, this is where the expertise exists to maybe explore an option like that.
Thank you. Are there any questions online, Anais, or anyone online? Okay.
Leila, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's a very great presentation, and the project is interesting. I have a question related to what's your long-term plan for preservations? Because now you have fundings, you can get fundings. Where is all this will be hosted in case you don't have fundings? This is one. Second, I wonder what's your policy on ownership and copyrights?
So CLIR and Stanford have started this and are committed to continuing this we've had, I think, 3 or 4 successive extramural grants that have helped sustain and grow it. At this point, as Jacob said in the presentation, it's really quite stable, and we're committed to maintaining this as a core service that we just continue to run. I think if there is extra funding that allows for new features, it allows for the expansion in content. But at this point, I'm fairly confident that we can keep it running as a stable and enduring asset for the long term. That said, we are, of course, interested in how are ways it could become even better with more content, more features, or more partners. So that in both cases, but there's not, this won't wink out. Wayne, do you want to say anything?
Just other than to reiterate what Tom said, that we are committed to running this. It is, I think the platform is at a very stable state right now. And as we've kind of shifted the idea of building up this platform, the technical infrastructure, starting this next phase is really on the outreach, making sure that we're getting people to actually be using this, being able to actually meet the needs of what people are wanting, and really listening to what people are wanting from it.
Sounds great. The one last question that I still have is about copyright and the content copyright in Digital Library of the Middle East.
Actually, not just only, sorry, Mohammed, copyright and ownership, because there is a huge issue with ownership that a lot of even researchers don't understand.
This is what I wanted to say, Leila, and thank you for raising that.
So currently, we defer to the data partners to assert that they have the right to display it on their site and to share it with us. We don't host anything on DLME. We just host the metadata. So all of the images and all of the objects themselves are hosted on the data provider site. So we kind of we get around that issue that way, and the metadata is a little bit easier to exchange. But that being said, we still have had challenges, particularly in international cases where copyright law might be different in a different country. We have a data partner in Italy, for example, and they don't know if they have the permission to share it. And unfortunately, some of those have the discussions have stalled in just trying to figure out whether they can share data. So that's one aspect. And I think there's going to be some collections that or resources that are important, but we're never going to be able to get copyright for those objects. And so I think we really have to explore some collection level access, or how do we describe the website and at least link it in DLME so people can find it and discover it without us harvesting metadata that we don't know if we have the copyright to do.
Great.
Thank you. I hope there is a conversation with the stakeholders, including the MELA, if this is possible. If you have any kind of workshops or conversation, I hope you will invite MELA to be part of this policy and copyright and ownership, because we have a lot of expertise on this area and we might be able to help and collaborate on this, in my opinion.
Absolutely, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. We have another question here.
In regard to copyright, during my trips to various Middle Eastern countries, I have been confronted by the president of the Arab publishers in the Arab world and their assistant and some of book dealers trying to alert me the fact that there are a lot of infringement on copyright and forgery books. They are in Lebanon, in Sudan, in Egypt. It's a very widespread in a way. He said, they asked me, because they know my connection to Mila, to alert the librarians and anyone who deals with their material. So there should be, in my opinion, I forced the people who supply me with books to stamp every book. Books come from Algeria, stamped with printed in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and before that I did it for Saudi Arabia and other places. That will take responsibility out of the libraries and put it on the neck of those poor agents who are collecting forgery books. Yeah. They will be responsible. They have to check it. They have to check it. I think this is a thorny issue, and you don't want to be party to something. And the custom people here in Boston and elsewhere, once before I did this stamping, they said to me, stamp every book, and if you don't, we will fine you $10,000, and you cannot take the books unless you come here and stamp them where they belong to. I mean, I tell you, this is a thorny issue and sensitive. I don't want my beloved Mila members be involved in this kind of stuff, but be careful, that's all it is. Yeah. Find a system or a way to protect yourself, your institution, your reputation, things like that, because it's going on very rapidly. And it's unfortunate, I'm sorry to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fawzi. Do you have any last thoughts or comments on that, or anything else?
Question or comment?
Anyone has another question or comment? Okay. Do we have anything online? Great. Thank you so much again for the food and for being here with us today, for the engaging conversation. And we definitely look forward to collaborating with you in either work groups or to communicate with the Digital Scholarly Resources Committee on MELA to probably get some ideas from them as well and to collaborate with them. Now we will move back to our program with the third panel. And the moderator for this panel is